Hello again everybody and welcome back to Test Flight in the F-86 Sabre. Now for this video, we'll go ahead and press on with the taxi and see about handling characteristics in the taxi and on the high-speed taxi where I take it up to high speed on the runway just short of the point where I would take off. So let's go ahead and jump back into the cockpit. Okay, taxiing. Safety pins removed, and that will be referring to both my pins in the cockpit and if any pins like in the main gear or on the any other systems on the external part of the aircraft are still in. Those will get pulled at this point because I am ready to taxi. Okay, safety pins removed. And specifically, what would I do in the cockpit? I know I would pull safety pins from my ejection handles. I would also have a pin in the canopy, like the canopy thruster. I'll look around. I remember vaguely where some of this stuff is. Other stuff, not so much. Okay. That was one of the things that I did when I was messing with F-86 is doing restoration. Well, I say doing restoration, mostly it was just me hanging out watching the experts do it, but cleaning up an injection seat for one of the aircraft and getting it into some kind of like displayable shape was one of the things I kind of jumped on. It's very, very interesting to look at. It wasn't this exact type of seat, but hey, it was a good seat either way. Okay, main gear wheel chocks removed, so I would signal for chocks out. And my crew chief will go in and remove it, give me a thumbs up. Throttle, advance and return to idle. So what I'm going to do here, and I need to have about 60% RPM on the engine. So I'm going to slowly advance to 60% RPM. That's going to give me enough thrust for momentum to get rolling. Now I'm going to have to engage nose wheel steering. The way that the nose wheel steering works in this aircraft is that I have a button. It's this button right here on my stick. I need to map that right now. I'm going to go to Escape, Adjust Controls. I'm going to go to Stick Grip. I'm going to go to Nose Wheel Steering Button. Joystick, Add. I'm going to map that to the equivalent button on my stick. While I'm here, I'm going to map my gunfire to my trigger. I'll put that on my second detent, which is Joy Button 6, is it not? Yeah, Joy Button 6, got it. Radar target selector button, I will also map that because that's going to be, I'll show you here in a second, but that's going to be the one that is right. Let me see, and I'll verify. Yeah, that's the right one for my weapons release switch. Okay, and the radar target selector is this button right here. And we'll get to see what this one does once we get into employment of the gun and other systems, okay? Okay, so I've got my nose wheel steering button, and yeah, what that does is I depress the button, then and only then is hydraulic pressure applied to the nose wheel steering system. So I have to depress the button, then I can start with my rudder, with my rudder pedals, controlling the nose wheel steering. So there are some little tricks and tips that go along with this, and we'll see this as we get going on how to make sure that you don't get yourself into a weird situation. You'll see what I mean here in a second with nose wheel steering. Okay, reading ahead here, turn and slip indicator, check for proper deflection of the turn needle during turns. This will be this indicator right here, so as I turn, I should get this moving in the appropriate direction. That's just an ops check to make sure that this indicator is working. Radio compass, check relative bearing to select a station. Okay, relative bearing to the selected station. I had one called up. I'll go back to, I'll do a little test here. I'll turn this on and I'll see if anything changes on my load meter. So right now, I mean, that can't be right. Let me push it back up to 45%. Okay, I've got a normal output from the generator. Total load right now is about 22%. Let me turn this on and see if this affects anything. And let me tune it to the appropriate station. Yeah, right there, okay. No, it didn't really affect anything. I was expecting it to bump up a little bit based on what systems were active. No big deal. I'll imagine that's the way it works. Okay, so I've got that pointing in the direction of the station. I'll check that it maintains track on that station as I taxi. I believe that was it for the taxi checklist. All I need to do now is taxi out and get lined up on the runway, so we ditch the checklist and I'll call for taxi clearance if I didn't do that already, but Okay, transmit receive. I'm still set up in position 1, which is the correct for my command radio for UHF. For ATC Polkey, that's not F1. Let me resume. F1, request taxi.
Polkey, in field 1-1. Request taxi to runway.
Okay, verify canopy closed. Okay, got that. Although I don't have to close the canopy until I get down to... Okay, clear taxi runway 9. Runway 9 is all the way at the other end of the airfield. Yeah, that's perfect. I'll take that. I'll just taxi for now along the taxiway, get a feel for handling, do the high-speed taxi back down the runway, then exit and come back into parking right here to run through the shutdown procedure. Okay, so let's do this. Okay, nose wheel steering. Actually, let me go ahead and advance the throttle to 60% for now. Very, very slowly. Okay, it's wanting to go. A little bit more. Okay, it starts at about 65%. Okay, I'll do a quick check of the brakes. Okay, I didn't expect them to be that responsive, but okay, quick check. And the brakes do work. I'll engage the nose wheel steering button. I'll hold the button. And there we go, nose wheel steering engages. And I want to keep the nose wheel steering button held as long as essentially until I'm straightened back out. And only release it when I'm stable and that I want to, and I'm at a point where I want to just kind of cruise for a while. And boy, it is kind of touchy. Okay, I've got it stabilized right about there. Just need to input a little bit more right. I'm getting a lot more responsiveness out of it than I thought I would. Okay, no big deal. I'll scope that out as we go. We've got plenty of time. Speaking of taxiing, where am I and where am I going? Okay, I just need to hang a right. I should have taken the parallel. No big deal. This will give me some more experience on handling the aircraft during taxi, and apparently I need it. Okay, so engaging the nose wheel steering button again. Take it around here and get lined back up on more or less what the taxi line would be. Oh, and there's very neat. There's a sound effect associated with the nose wheel steering, so you can hear it kind of. You can hear the actuator kind of through the headset as as power comes on and off it. Very cool. Okay, let me bring it around here to the actual taxiway. Stay off of this slightly shady-looking area. Yeah, very cool-looking aircraft out here. But one thing to note during the taxi that I've been burning a lot of fuel sitting in chocks. That is a huge consideration when it comes to maximizing your mission range. Very cool aircraft. Illusion 76. You want to make the taxi as short as possible. So let me hit the brakes here and see if I can nail this this turn. So really, that's why it's important to get all those ops checks done before you start the engines, and then, really make the engine start up, the additional ops checks of the hydraulic and flight control systems, everything else just kind of as expedient as possible, just to minimize the time that you're burning fuel. I forget the number, but I think it's like 20 to 30 pounds per minute just taxiing and sitting in chocks that you burn. And when you're only talking, for goodness sake, right now, I started out with about 2,800 pounds internal, according to the gauge at least. That's the point where in any other aircraft in DCS, I'd be thinking about an RTB, but that's the default loadout in the F-86. And that's why drop tanks are going to be important later on, especially if we get into flying some of these missions that might have us up a little bit longer, like the out and back cross country that I have coming up, mission after next, and some of the other employment missions that I plan on doing. And then, of course, single missions and eventually a campaign as those start to roll out, either officially or through user-created campaigns. So overall, it's handles very nicely. Once you get over every aircraft is going to handle a little bit differently. So let me engage it again. Tweak it up just a little bit. Yeah, very cool. Okay, let me turn back off onto Bravo and continue out to runway 09. Okay, not a very... It's an adequate turning radius, I guess, as long as you're planning ahead. That's the same for... can be said for any aircraft. I was mentioning a trap that you could kind of get yourself into. If you mess up and release the nose wheel steering button with the nose wheel canted off to the left or to the right, the trick, and this is just not from experience, this is just from reading somewhere in the manual or in the copy of the flight manual that I have, that the trick is to align the rudder with the direction the nose wheel steering or the nose wheel is pointing, and only then will the nose wheel steering actuator engage. So you have to, like if you mess up and you have your nose wheel steering or your nose wheel pointed off to the right, move your rudder pedals to the right and then try to engage the nose wheel steering. And as long as they're aligned, then it will re-engage the steering for you, and you'll be able to correct it. But really the trick is just to not get yourself into that position at all, and make sure that when you release the nose wheel steering switch that you're traveling forward and that the nose wheel is aligned. Okay, one more little turn here and we're at the end of runway 09. Turning radius was not, well, it was my fault. I just wasn't okay, yeah, little, hey, it just takes getting used to. That's what these videos are all about, is learning the aircraft from scratch and getting used to how it handles. So it's a little bit different from what I'm used to in the A-10 and I guess the F-15. And of course the Huey. Okay, so coming up on runway 09, I never did check my radio compass to see if it was functioning. I'll do that as I turn onto the runway. Okay, runway 09, let me taxi out here a little bit closer. No, request takeoff clearance. Kolke, request takeoff, please.
In field 1-1, request takeoff. Field 1-1, Kolke, you are cleared for takeoff when ready. Climb 300 at QFE 30.09.
And I have got, yeah, y'all were probably screaming at me through the monitor. I've got to get used to the way that this, the directional gyro, or the, yeah, whatever this thing was called, the way this is set up, because it doesn't, it's not quite as intuitive as I would have, it doesn't work the way that I thought it worked. I was a little bit disoriented there. The arrow points to the direction that I'm traveling. This is hooked into a, essentially a compass that's out there on, I thought it was the left wing. It might be under this panel, or it might be under this panel. I thought it was like an indentation out there, and you can see it kind of mounted on the top of the wing, like physically out there, kind of, yeah, anyway. But it's tied into a compass, so the arrow is going to point to your current direction of travel. So right now, of course, I am pointing at 270, not 090, and I made this mistake because, well, I just didn't realize that I was looking at it as, okay, when I started the taxi, I was pointing I was pointing due north when I really wasn't. That's what it comes down to. Okay, so lesson learned there. This works differently from what I'm used to. Okay, no big deal. And we'll move on and press on to before takeoff. Okay, armament switches verified off. Got it. Trim for takeoff check. Now this is kind of weird how it works. Not weird, it's just different. Okay, now I'm going to do this one axis at a time. I'm going to start with, it doesn't really matter where you start, but I'll start with nose up and down. I'll trim it until that light illuminates, and then I'll release. I'll do it for left and right, trim until the light comes on. Rudder, I don't know if I really want to touch rudder, but okay, let me try to figure out how this works. Okay, so I was hoping that would be like a momentary toggle that would automatically snap back, but okay, so it's like a stick in position switch. It's an actual toggle switch. Okay, so the key is just to trim until you get the lights in all 3 axes. And then you've got the takeoff trim set. So it's actually trimmed a little bit for aft stick. So I'm going to be trimmed for nose up. Now on this run, I do not want to get airborne, so I'm going to abort this run at about 70 knots, right when the aerodynamic forces start to really act on the aircraft. I just want to make sure that it's going to be controllable with my current setup as I go down the runway. And just make sure that I'm not going to crash. That's what a high-speed taxi is all about. This is what you would do in a single-seat aircraft if you were getting ready. Probably the next sortie after this, you would actually take off. Okay, so takeoff trim, got it. Wing flap lever down. So let me go ahead and put this to the down position. You verify they're going down. Okay, flaps are down. Would I be able to see that? Yeah, I can see that externally. Or internally. I don't need to go to the external view for that anymore. Hey, throttle. Cautiously. Wait a minute. Okay, where am I at? Okay, canopy closed. Got it. Oxygen reg. Normal oxygen. Got that. That was that little two-way toggle switch right there. Engine anti-ice and screen switch retract and then extend. This kind of puzzled me for a while because I'm going to retract this screen, then I'm going to extend it. The reason is you retract it just to make sure that nothing got caught in the screen, so that if you get to a point where you want to retract it during flight, you're going to find out sooner rather than later if you actually ingested something and something is caught up against the screen. So that's why you retract it and then re-extend it. Takeoff position, align nose wheel, and that's what I did. I came out here to the runway, I continued rolling forward, and then released the nose wheel switch. And toe brakes hold. And this looks like a great place for another break in the video, so I'll come back next time with a high-speed taxi, and then taxi into parking, and go through the shutdown procedure. So thanks again for watching, I sure hope you are still enjoying the series, and I will see you next time.